Welcome to Inside Creative Minds. I'm your host, Trey Goodman. We're coming to you from the Tempe Center for the Arts, a beautiful facility here in Tempe. And we've got a very interesting show for you today. We're going to be talking to John Kane, the architect who created TCA. But before that, we're going to meet Woody Wilson. Now, he's with Lakeshore Producers. They put on a jazz series here at the TCA, but he's also a nationally syndicated comic strip writer. Maybe you've heard of his work, Rex Morgan, MD, and Judge Parker. Let's go check it out. Well, Woody Wilson, we are here on the stage of the Tempe Center for the Arts. Welcome to Inside Creative Minds.
Thanks for having me.
And let's introduce you to the audience. You are a comic strip writer.
That's right.
And you are a jazz music promoter.
Promoter. Yeah.
Now, the comic strips, that's really interesting because we're talking about two comics that have been around quite a while.
Almost as long as me.
Let's see, it's Judge Parker and Rex Morgan, MD.
Correct.
Both started in, what, 40s, 50s?
Rex Morgan in 48, Judge Parker in 1950.
Now, obviously, you haven't been writing them the whole time. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to be showing some of your work as we talk today so people can get an idea. But you write it. You don't illustrate it. You write it.
Right.
You work with an illustrator. But what got you started into being a comic strip writer?
I was living in San Francisco back in the 70s, and it just appealed to me. I just thought it just sort of came out of the blue.
Wow.
I wanted a job where I could do what I wanted from home. I wanted to write from home. I wanted to do something from home, and I just happened to run into a guy who was Gary Trudeau's publisher, Jim Andrews.
Yeah.
He's dead now, Universal Press Syndicate. And I told him that I wanted to write a comic strip, and this was late at night down in San Francisco on the wharf in an art gallery where I was working.
Yeah.
And he fixed me up with a guy in Cleveland, Ohio who wanted a writer.
Wow.
So we created a strip that went absolutely nowhere over a couple of years in different incarnations, and I just stuck with it. It was just something that was more or less an obsession. And then I moved to Phoenix to go to work for the Phoenix Gazette, the evening newspaper here, and read a story in the Arizona Republic about Nick Dallas, Dr. Nick Dallas, who created Rex Morgan, Apartment 3G, and Judge Parker.
Yeah.
I needed a new artist for my comic strip, so I called him up.
You just called him up?
I just called him up and asked him if he would take a look at my stuff and help me find an artist for my strip that I wanted to revive. And I went over to his house and laid out my portfolio, and he thought it was good enough to offer me a job.
How'd you feel at that moment?
I grew up with these strips, like a lot of other people in my generation. I grew up with Rex Morgan, and all three of these strips were in and still are in my hometown paper in West Virginia. So they were sort of my window to the outside world. Wow. Apartment 3G particularly. It was three women living in a flat in New York City, and I always loved them. So when he offered me a job as his assistant, I took it.
I mean, that had to be like a dream come true.
It was 1982.
Yeah.
And I worked with him as his assistant for 8 years, and then he got ill and passed away in 1991. And I assumed two of the three.
Wow, which is Judge Parker and Rex Morgan, MD. Now, those are, for some people that don't know, I mean, they're viewed by, what is it, how many?
We have combined readership of 30 million people a day.
30 million.
In 14 different countries, 350 papers.
And this has been going on, well, you were an assistant for 8 years, and then you took it over, what, 90? So, I mean, now we're talking almost 20 more years you've been doing this?
I've been with these features, these strips, for 28 years.
28 years. Now, could you go through the process sort of quickly, like you get an idea, or how does it go? How do you make a strip happen?
It's just a story.
Yeah.
You come up with a premise. In Rex Morgan, it can be a medical. We try to give information on new medical things.
Right.
You know, people different kinds of things that interest people.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of research. My wife is a PhD in health policy and is a professor at a
So that
university.
really helps then.
It helps enormously.
Wow.
So we research these stories, but it's about the characters. You know, you have to make your characters compelling, and the stories move day by day. A story normally lasts anywhere from 4 to 8 months.
Wow. Yeah.
And then you bring in a new group of characters, but you always have the core characters.
Do you have the story in mind and then you create it, and do you do like a season where for the 6 months you're going to do the whole year, or how does that process work?
No, it's just you sit down at your computer and hack out a week.
Wow. Okay, so a week at a time?
It's 6 dailies, Monday through Saturday, and then a Sunday.
Wow.
And the question that I'm asked most frequently is what is your lead time?
Yeah.
And it's 3 months.
3 months. Okay.
Because the color separations on the Sunday strips take time, and there aren't that many color houses, people that print comic sections in the United States. So chances are your newspaper didn't print its own comic page.
Oh,
It comes
okay.
from somewhere else.
Do you ever feel pressure? I mean, you have a lot of people that are depending on you that like your stuff. I mean, I assume you get a lot of response, emails,
Yeah,
probably things.
we do.
Right? I mean,
I'm a deadline guy. I'm a newspaper guy.
okay.
So I'm used to deadlines. So I write on deadlines. That's my life.
Yeah. You don't ever feel the pressure of like, I got to come up with another storyline, or does it just come to you?
Sure,
I mean,
but it just happens.
yeah.
You just sit down and do it. There's a bunch of people waiting at the other end.
Yes, there are.
There's an artist and an editor, and that all has to be done on time. And then there's the syndicate on the other end.
Wow.
I work for King Feature Syndicate in New York.
It's a pretty big company.
It's a division of the Hearst Corporation.
Very big company.
So there's people waiting to do camera work and layout and all kinds of stuff.
So 28 years in counting. What gets you up every day to do it, to continue to do it? And is there a time when you think you'll be moving on to something else, or what?
It's fun.
Yeah. You still having fun?
Oh yeah, I'm a professional writer. I write for money. You know, I write for the paycheck, and that allows me a lot of time to do the things like the jazz,
Right.
and the community work that I do here in Tempe.
Well, one of the reasons we're here at the Tempe Center for the Arts is you produce a series of shows
Right,
that occur here.
right.
And how did that get started? I mean, that really has nothing to do with comic strips, right? So,
It just started as a result of my community involvement with some friends, and we wanted to bring jazz to Mill Avenue,
okay.
back to Mill Avenue in Tempe. So a friend of mine who's a local architect here, Stu Seifer, and another friend, Roy Hoyt, we created a series at Monty's La Casa Vieja,
Yes.
Monty's Back Door,
Yeah.
Monday Night Jazz, and it just took off. It was an immediate success.
Now, why jazz? Is that just something that you're close to?
We
or-
just have a thing for it.
Yeah.
The three of us really are jazz people, and we like the music.
Now, you don't play yourself, but I
No.
believe one of your relatives.
My son is a
Yeah.
trumpet player and
Right.
a professor.
Yeah.
He teaches jazz.
So do you get the same kick and the same rush out of producing jazz series as you do a comic strip?
I do. It's opened up a whole new interest in my life. We're working with the city of Tempe. We're working with friends mostly. Tempe is a small community in a very large city. We all know each other here. So I mean, when you put together a series like this, your friends help you. They come out, they support you, they buy tickets, they give you money to do things, they support your program. So that's the way it's been for this.
Do you ever get any ideas from the people that you meet and the goings on with the jazz for content or anything for your Rex Morgan or your Judge Parker?
It always helps.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always getting story ideas. That's my job. That's where I make my money, is syndicated comic strips.
How does the content work? Do you have to run that by anyone, or
No.
is it, wow, how cool is that?
I have an editor who, you know, if I get out of line, she'll call me up and she'll say, I don't think we should do this. But that's rare. They trust me to do the things. I've been doing it long enough that that they trust me to do the right thing.
How does the relationship work with you create it, you write it, and then you send it to an illustrator? I mean, do you meet those guys once in a while, or?
Actually, I've never met them.
Oh, wow.
I met my original artist with Judge Parker, Harold Ledoux. Went down and saw him, but my artist on Judge Parker lives in Montevideo, Uruguay.
Uruguay.
And my other artist, Graham Nolan, lives in upstate New York. So, you know, we talk on the phone, we email weekly.
Yeah.
It's a very collaborative relationship.
You just never have met in person.
No, no.
Wow. Well, where do you see Judge Parker and Rex Morgan going? I mean, eventually, is this common in comics that it's passed on to another person and passed on to another person?
Yeah, you know, we have real problems in the newspaper business right now. We had problems back in the 90s when markets consolidated.
Yeah.
You know, when the morning paper and the evening paper combined, or they drove one out of business.
Right.
But our strips are classics and they stick around. We have a dedicated, loyal readership.
Yes.
So I haven't seen it, I haven't felt it personally, you know, in my paycheck, so to speak.
Yeah.
But a lot of others are. A lot of others have seen it. Newspapers are going out of business. Our future is online and in the computer, and that's on the internet, and we see a lot of that. I see it developing gradually.
How does it feel to be a part of like an American comic icon?
I think it's a great thing. It was a wonderful opportunity 28 years ago, and it's still something I don't take for granted. It's a great job. It's a wonderful job for a writer. You have to have a gift for dialogue.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have a gift for creating characters, and I seem to have morphed into that. I seem to have.
Well, we're running out of time, but I've got to ask you one more question. So somebody up and coming, they're watching this and they're like, oh, that's the job I want. Words of wisdom, any suggestions?
Tenacity.
Yeah.
Perseverance. You know, you have to figure out what you want to do in life, and then you just have to go for it, and you just don't take no for an answer.
Don't take no for an answer.
That's my advice to anybody who wants to do something. Is if that's what you want to do, then you have to make sure that it gets done.
Well, Woody, it's been a tremendous treat, and I've just enjoyed sitting here on the stage of the Tempe Center.
Isn't it a beautiful room?
It's stunning. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Whether it's comic strip writing or music promotion, Woody sure knows how to entertain an audience. And we'll be back with more right after this.
Where are you going to show up this weekend? ShowUp.com is your valley-wide connection to theater, music, dance, art, and a whole lot more. The ShowUp.com calendar and discount ticket marketplace has something for everyone. Enjoy a fun activity with family, have a quiet, romantic date, or some exhilarating action with friends. It's fast, it's free, and it's all online at ShowUp.com. So where are you going to show up this weekend? ShowUp.com. It's all you got to do.
You know, the Tempe Center for the Arts is so unique, it's got to help the creativity of the performers who come here. Now let's go meet John Kane, the architect, who made it all happen. John Kane, welcome to Inside Creative Minds, and we're here at the Tempe Center for the Arts, which I think you had something to do with.
A little, a smidge.
You were one of the architects that
Yes.
created this with the firm Architecton.
Yes.
Now, what is Architecton? What is that name all about?
Architecton is the name of my partnership
Yeah.
that we formed 20 years ago with my partners Greg Lambright, Joe Salvatore, and Doug Brown. And we didn't want to sound like attorneys, so we came up with a name, and we looked in the dictionary. My partner Greg found it. He goes, "It's Greek for master builder," and
You're
it was
like perfect.
yeah, it's going to be a temporary name, but it's stuck, so it's cool.
Well, now we're going to be looking at your work today as we talk about what it's like to be an architect. But really, it's got to be pretty cool. You're an architect, right? I mean, and you designed this structure. How did this place come to be?
A lot of hard work before we even got involved in terms of the bond that was passed to pay for it, and then the opportunity to work with another firm. We collaborate a lot with firms, and this one was with Barton Myers out of Los Angeles, and what an amazing opportunity to work side by side with Barton. And then it takes a cast of thousands to build something of this caliber, not just the architects, the clients, the engineers, the contractors, all the citizens. It's a lot of fun.
When did you know you wanted to be an architect?
When I was about 12 years old.
12 years old, really?
I was in Chicago, and I got to go to Chicago, and I saw the John Hancock building, which kind of looked different than everything else. I'm like, it was neat. It was just
And then from there, you just sort of gravitated into the field. You graduated from ASU, and now you've designed and built all sorts of things. I mean, multi-use, residential, commercial. Do you have how do you approach? Do people come to you and you bid on a project or they want you to do a project, but how do you approach them differently as you put them together with the different uses, or how do you?
Every project's different. Every client's different. The sites are different. The budgets are different. Everything's different. So so we approach it uniquely each time.
Now, a lot of these buzzwords we hear nowadays: LEED certification, I believe, going green. Just briefly, what's all of that?
It's a way of getting us to think about buildings being more sustainable, thinking about how our buildings use less energy, how materials, they're healthier buildings. They're buildings that just make more sense. They're more in harmony with nature. And it's a great way to just make more sense financially. I mean, it costs a lot less to operate these buildings. So it's a good program.
Now, I know you probably don't want to blow your own horn, but I understand you're inducted into the College of Fellows, which is a very prestigious, what is it? Is it the American Institute of Architects? They have 80-some thousand members, and only I think 2,000 or 2,500 people have received that award, right?
Yeah, I'm really honored. I'm still in shock. Yeah, it's an amazing thing.
That's a
I'm
big
really
wow,
proud.
right?
And I couldn't have done it without my partners and a lot of people that I get to work side by side with day in and day out. We're really instrumental in that.
So obviously, from 12 years old to now, I mean, you've accomplished all of this, and you're doing these amazing projects. You've won one of the top awards. What do you have in your mind that you still want to create? What keeps you going? What gets you up every day and you want to do more?
The next project. I mean, and every project has an interesting challenge. And I think the things that are really interesting now is how to create an urban, livable cities and things that are in harmony with the desert. I mean, we live in this really crazy place. And, how do we design buildings that are really appropriate for this and trying to make the next one better and smarter?
Well, I have a quote. This is from you. You said the responsibility of an architect must transcend the profession to include the community at large. What does that mean?
Well, we have a role. We're designing buildings for the public, and we spend public dollars. So we have to be really, really conscious of how we spend those dollars smartly. So it's part of our job to take it very seriously.
Is that just something you personally feel, or is that?
I do. I mean, and it's something my entire firm believes in, but I think the practice in general, I think, takes that very seriously. That's how we're trained in school, and we have a responsibility. We're a service profession. We serve the clients. We don't do this for ourselves. We do it for others, and it's really important.
Take me through the process. We're sitting here in this beautiful structure. It wasn't here at one time, and it had to be created. Just briefly, how that process goes.
Oh, it's about a 2-year process of the design after the citizens get the bond and everything going. But this was a landfill, so one of the first things we had to do was actually dig a big hole and restore and bring the site back up. But the idea of design is it's a collaborative process. There's a lot of individuals. As we move through the design concepts, we're working with the users that are going to use the facility. They have a lot of input. We're working with the code officials. We're working with engineers. A whole cast of people that kind of work together.
How does it feel when the door, the groundbreaking, or not the groundbreaking, but when the ribbon's cut and the door's open? I mean, how did you feel when that happened?
It's amazing. It's a lot of weight off our shoulders, because there's a lot of pressure to get to this point, and everybody's working really hard to pull it all together. But it's really, really an amazing feeling, and then it's always fun to come back and participate in it too.
Let's talk about this facility itself. The way I see it, it's like there's this cover over it's sort of like 3 buildings inside. Can you explain was that your idea or whose idea it was, and what's that all about?
The idea was that the team realized, and the city realized, that if they were going to put the building under the flight path, we had to protect it from the noise of the planes.
Okay.
So these are very sound sensitive type projects. So the big idea was to create a protective shell, but also works really well for our climate. So not only does it protect from the sound, it's also a really great way to mitigate the heat. So you kind of get double
I mean,
bang
that's
for the dollar.
ingenious, because if you were to take the shell off, which you really couldn't, but like if a monster came and ripped it off, right? You'd have 3 separate buildings underneath it.
It's a little village underneath. Working with Barton, Barton had the idea that it's part of Chaco Canyon, or it's similar to Chaco Canyon. We look at precedent, how those that came before us 1,000 years ago designed in similar climates, and so we take a lot of inspiration from those.
Isn't that amazing? It's like, how people are always saying we're moving forward, and you went back in time and took something that worked then.
They were pretty smart back then. They were,
Yeah.
they didn't have air conditioning. They still had to survive in these kind of climates.
But I
So
mean,
some
that's
good
cool that
ideas.
somebody, I don't know, had just the thought process to say, hey, we're in the desert, let's kind of see what was happening before. What do you want folks to know about the profession of architecture?
Oh gosh, there's a lot to know about it. It's a great profession, and I'm really fortunate to be an architect. But there's a lot of things you can do with it. It's not just design. It's not, you can design small buildings, big buildings, transportation projects, housing.
What do you like to design?
Oh, I like to design anything and everything.
Yeah.
Everything's interesting. I mean, and it's always unique. I think the ones I enjoy most are the community projects, where we get to really engage with the community and design something for them and make it unique for that particular neighborhood, city, whether it's a police station, whether it's it doesn't matter. It's just they're community projects that the community will use day in and day out.
Let's tick some off of here that you've done in the Valley. You did something at Chandler Gilbert, right?
We've worked on Chandler Gilbert's campus to the Student Center there. We're doing a new project, Ironwood Hall, currently. Scottsdale Community College, we did a wellness center there. We did ASU Foundation building, Tempe Police Substation, the light rail stations.
Wow.
Yeah,
So definitely community oriented. Have you ever had the luxury maybe or the situation where you've thought about something and then we're able to push that to somebody to say, I mean, we need this, and I'm an architect, I would like to build it, but let's see if we can find a way to make it happen? Or is it always someone coming to you with, here's the next project?
It's usually somebody coming to us. Maybe the exception was when my partners and I designed and built our own office building.
And how cool is that
So
place?
it was fun. So it was so it's kind of interesting to actually kind of be a client, and you learn a lot about being a
Now,
client.
was there
from
any
the inside.
infighting between the 4 of you going, no, I want upstairs or I want downstairs?
It's collaboration.
Oh,
We
is that
call
what
it
it is?
It's called collaboration. Yeah, I mean, and we had a lot of fun doing that actually.
Well, it is a very interesting place. I mean, I visited there and it was like, wow, it just seemed so open to just creating. I mean, for lack of a better word.
Thank you.
I think you even had a few dogs running around.
Yeah.
So what's the draw to architecture?
I think the ability to create something from nothing, and solve people's problems, and it's always new. We're always learning new things. It's never dull at all.
You have a favorite architect, or you have a special project you're sort of holding in your back pocket that you're hoping to create? You're going to have a 1,000-story building that you're going to design for China or
No,
something?
I don't think so. I have a lot of friends that are architects, and a lot of them are heroes, and I love the opportunity to kind of see what they're doing too. And it's like I think we push each other and we learn from each other. But I just can't wait to do the next one. That's kind of
So really, any
going.
project that comes in honestly gets you excited?
pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah, because we never know what it's going to be, and the client doesn't necessarily know what it's going to be either. So it's that whole exploration and kind of process of kind of creating it together is a really dynamic and interesting kind of way to spend a day.
I mean, you talk about collaboration, and there's 4 of you, and you obviously are all very talented architects. So do you guys put it in the middle of the floor and you all fight for who gets to create it, or how's that work? I mean, you all
No,
it's
we all have different strengths, and my firm's about 35 people, so it's not just the 4 of us. It's
Right.
a lot of individuals plus the engineers and clients. So we all have different strengths. So some people are more technically oriented, some are more about management, some are more design oriented, and we all feed off of one another. We all support one another and work together to create something, because buildings are fairly complex structures and needs a lot of expertise and skills to pull it all together.
Is a lot of it come down to form versus function as well, or?
They go hand in hand. I mean, the first and foremost, it's got to work for the client. It's got to function. If it doesn't function, I don't care how good it looks, people will always be mad at you. So we always have to make sure it works first.
And how about cost versus creativity?
Absolutely. They go hand in hand too. I mean, we can actually, it's kind of fun how to spend less money to still create great architecture. We spend a lot of time working on that.
Do you ever think about, what it's going to be like maybe when you're gone and people are looking at your work, 50 years from now, or it's maybe a ruin or something? I mean, do you ever think about that?
Actually, a lot. Especially working on this one, because this one's going to be here for a long time.
I mean,
300 or 400 years from now, I think it's going to be a great ruin.
Yeah. So does that energize you as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, because we study as architects. We go and look at buildings that were done a couple hundred years ago that are great ruins, and they kind of inspire us when we're.
Any place in the world that really inspired you architecturally?
Europe in general.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of buildings that actually create great public places, buildings that are less about themselves, more about the streets and places in between, about community. That was a big eye-opener, kind of a little different than how we do it here in the States.
It certainly is. Having traveled to Europe, I mean, I'm amazed at how it stands out. It's like very noticeable. What would you like to see architecture do in the next 10 to 15 years?
Be as sustainable as possible. We need to kind of figure out how to use less energy, leave less of a footprint, and build really smart with nature, more in harmony versus kind of working against it. We need to kind of be a little more in sync with it. And there's a lot of great trends and a lot of great ways of doing that now. So.
Any words of wisdom for a student thinking about becoming an architect or maybe in his final year or something?
Just be a sponge. I mean, there's so much to learn, and you're going to keep learning, and it never ends. So if you love to learn, it's a great profession.
Well, John, I love your work.
Oh, thank you very, very much.
Thanks for creating cool things here in the Valley.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, that's our show, and I hope you enjoyed it. Hey, if you want to find out more about John Kane or Woody Wilson, go to our website at InsideCreativeMinds.com. And don't forget, if you've missed a past episode, you can always check it out. All the shows are online all the time, just for you. Until next time.